I'm going to chat to you guys a little bit more about our KZN tour. That's obviously KZN in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, where we are going to embark on exploring a little bit of the reptile diversity that we do get across in KwaZulu-Natal. Just a little breakdown. We're going to just chat about who I am and what I'm doing and why I'm talking to you guys tonight. Why possibly looking at KwaZulu-Natal to come and explore on a reptile-based holiday. We're going to talk about photographing reptiles, the risks that come with that, or the risks that don't come with that in this case, snakes and safety, and then we're going to deep dive into the Naturetrek program and just give you guys a little bit more of a breakdown. But first things first, my name is Tyrone Ping, and I am based here in South Africa. I'm currently based in Cape Town, but I grew up in KwaZulu-Natal, where I spent most of my life. So it's safe to say I know KwaZulu-Natal and its reptiles fairly well. Growing up, I had most of these animals running around in my backyard, so it makes it fairly easy. Um, what I have done is over the last couple of years, I've started to write several field guides on the region. The latest field guide is Snakes and Other Reptiles of the Western Cape, and before that was Snakes and Other Reptiles of KwaZulu-Natal. So it's actually been the first field guide of its kind for the region. So safe to say that you're in relatively good hands when it comes to the snakes and other reptiles on this upcoming tour. So first of all, we'll kick off with why KwaZulu-Natal. South Africa is a pretty large and diverse country with 9 provinces. KwaZulu-Natal is one of the, I would probably say, maybe perhaps biased, but one of the best provinces in terms of weather. We have over 300 sunny days in the year, which means we also experience a lot of rain. We have diverse habitats from these beautiful coastal forests, which all of these following slides we will be exploring in sort of great detail in the upcoming tour. We've got the coastal forests of the Isimangaliso Wetland Park. We've got the high altitude Drakensberg Mountains. We take it all the way back to Cozy Bay, which is right on the South African Mozambican border. A nice, beautiful estuarine system. We can see they've got these ancient fish traps that the locals use in an ethical way to harvest fish from the environment. We look at the Natal Midlands, which traditionally was a really large habitat filled with thick, dense forests. It's now been cleared for a lot of farming, but there are still an amazing diversity of grassland species, including the endemic Natal Midlands dwarf chameleon, which is going to be a really highlight of animals to see on our trip, which can still be found in the region with relative ease if you know where you're looking. We then head to an area in the northern part of the province called Zululand, which is obviously famous for things like black mambas, your big five, of course, and not to mention your megafauna. Although it is a reptile-based and focused, reptile amphibian-based focused tour, we'll never pass up the opportunity to see fantastic megafauna, everything from big cats, giraffes, antelope, and of course, elephants. When it comes to photographing reptiles on these sort of tours, it's open to an array of people. We do have people that come on tours that simply are happy with, just getting a quick cell phone shot of an animal, maybe just looking at it really closely and moving on. And we get guys like this who've got their lighting rigs, their lighting setups, and, want to get really up close and personal with the animals, which is perfectly fine. We obviously just make sure the animals are always front of mind, so we don't over photograph animals or have too many people photographing animals at the same time. But yeah, if you want to get beautiful shots, macro, if you've got a whole set of macro photography gear you want to get to, which I'm that way inclined, so take very nice detailed photograph of animals. So that's also right up my alley. And when it comes to dealing with venomous snakes, you'll see here we've got a little eastern shield nose snake. This is found right on the border of Mozambique and South Africa. Very rare snake in the region, and the possibilities of bumping into these animals in Zululand, it's just a road cruise away most of the time. And when it comes to snakes and safety, obviously safety of everyone on our tours is always our primary concern. So if you're a little bit nervous around venomous snakes, for example, you are never going to be on a situation where you're just left with a venomous snake if you want to take pictures and everyone goes about and does their own thing. I'm always the one in control of venomous snakes. I've been handling and dealing with venomous snakes for probably the last 20 years. I grew up, like I said, in KwaZulu-Natal, where we had black mambas occasionally coming through the backyard. We had boomslang in the trees. So I've been dealing with venomous snakes for a very long time, from a very young age. So we do everything safely using all the correct gear. And speaking of the correct gear, you'll see here, this is a black mamba in a Perspex tube. And that also gives us a really nice opportunity for people to get really close up and get really beautiful pictures of black mambas with virtually no risk to them. As you can see, I'm holding the black mamba at the base of the tube so the snake cannot reverse, while you still allow the head to protrude safely, and you're able to get really nice photographs knowing that you're completely safe. You can see we use these tubes quite often. And this is an incredibly large Mozambique spitting cobra, which is quite a common species in northern KZN, as the name suggests, and as you can see from my eyewear, these snakes do spit or spray their venom. So again, safety is always going to be a top priority when dealing with the snakes, especially on the tour in a nocturnal environment where these snakes are quite active. So we're just going to have a little breakdown of what the tour entails, the sort of animals we can expect to see on the tour. You can see we are concentrating from Durban. We move northwards up the coast, and then we bump around to several game reserves and several key spots along the coast, which we call Zululand, and going right up the coast to Cozy Bay, which sits on the Mozambican border. So we arrive in Durban, and it's actually a place where I grew up, so I'm very well familiar with the animals that are in and amongst the suburbs. So this is a little flapneck chameleon sleeping on a little piece of grass. He just woke up for the photograph. And yeah, we're in Durban, and these are some of the key species that we are likely to see in the region. From left to right, we have your KwaZulu-Natal dwarf chameleon. This little cute tree frog with the bright red eyes is a member of the Leptopellis, or the tree frogs, and that's the Natal tree frog. On the bottom left, we've got a green water snake. And the reason these animals are all pictured together is often on our nocturnal surveys where we're looking for chameleons and frogs, you often find these sleeping green snakes in the foliage, typically quite close to water. And it makes quite an exciting nocturnal search when you're not only looking for calling frogs, sleeping chameleons, but you're looking for sleeping green snakes in the branches. And of course, we have the vervet monkey, which is also called the blue monkey, which are quite common amongst the suburban environments. And I will tell you, on our recent tour to Limpopo and the northern parts of KwaZulu-Natal, I was a victim to a few vervet monkeys who snuck through my hotel window and stole a nice loaf of sour bread off my table. So you got to watch out for the monkeys when you come to Southern Africa. The next stop is going to probably be one of my favorite parts of the tour, is we head to the Natal Midlands and look for the iconic Natal Midlands dwarf chameleon, which you see pictured in front of you. Several other key species along the way in the Natal Midlands. We've got this really unique lizard on the left-hand side called the coppery grass lizard. As you can see, it's very serpentine in nature, has a very long elongated tail. Tail makes up about 60% of the body, and it's got tiny little forelimbs and rear limbs. And unfortunately, people often mistake these animals for snakes, and they are feared amongst the community when they really don't need to be. And another iconic species of the Natal Midlands is the banded rinkhals, another venomous snake which superficially resembles a cobra. They can both spit and spray their venom, and always a welcome sight to see when you're walking through the high altitude grasslands. And when startled, they spread a formidable hood and they hiss and spit to their heart's content. On the bottom left, we have the common crag lizard, another beautiful lizard, which is quite common in the higher altitude regions, often sitting on the edge of rocks and basking. So it allows you to get quite close and get some really nice photographs. One of the most exciting species we are likely to see on the Natal Midlands leg is this chameleon in the bottom center here. It is known only as the emerald dwarf chameleon. It is an undescribed species of dwarf chameleon of the Bradypodium. And although the species has been known to science since the early 1980s, it remains a mystery in terms of where it fits in with the other animals. So it is not formally described to science. You won't really see it in any field guides. And hopefully it is described soon because it is a beautiful chameleon and is only really known from the high altitude regions in the Natal Midlands. And of course, there are much larger animals to be seen. The zebra are quite a common sighting, as well as things like your eland and other small antelope. As we go up into the Midlands, we will never pass up the opportunity to see some nice, interesting mammals. And even in our nocturnal searches, it is not uncommon to see animals like serval and genet while we are out at night looking for chameleons. So there's really something for everyone, although it's not specifically a general tour. We will likely encounter some really interesting nocturnal mammals. We then go from the Natal Midlands and we head towards the coast, a small coastal town called Mtumzini. Pictured here is the southern twig snake, also called the vine snake, and South Africans also call it the bird snake. You can see it's got a beautiful red tongue, a highly venomous snake, and there is no antivenom for this species, although they're very shy and docile, so they rarely bite people, and it's really not an animal that is cause of any great concern. We explore the beautiful raffia palm forests, as you can see on the bottom right of Mtumzini, and likely animals that we will be encountering are things like a forest cobra on the top left, a common species of green snake called the Eastern Natal green snake, often seen zipping through the foliage and on any sort of artificial cover. Always nice to see them. And then Mtumzini also hosts a plethora of amphibian species. We can see these really tiny water lily frogs on the left here, and the iconic spotted shovel-nosed frog. Up in Africa, they also call them the pig-nosed frog, which you can see why. And so all of these animals are quite likely to encounter on our sort of excursions throughout Mtumzini. We then move further northwards to a really, really interesting town, probably one of my favorite places in KwaZulu-Natal to look for reptiles, the town of St. Lucia. And before we get started on the reptile diversity, St. Lucia is a famous town for having hippos that wander the streets. You can see this image on the bottom left. It may look photoshopped, but the hippos do roam the streets at night, especially even on rainy, cool afternoons. And that is the main road in St. Lucia, and it's not uncommon to see the hippos waltzing around there during the day. And one of the other main attractions of St. Lucia, we've got the Sitaro's dwarf chameleon, as you can see in this front center frame, a beautiful little chameleon which was first described from the town of St. Lucia in the late 80s. Below that, we have one of South Africa's few what we call a poisonous frog. They really just excrete a bit of a toxin from the skin. So if you touch it, it does nothing to your hands, but if you happen to put it in your eyes, your mouth, gives you a bit of an unpleasant reaction. We've got the ever-present Eastern hinged tortoise on the top left, and below, followed by the iconic Eastern green mamba. St. Lucia is a really nice coastal town, flanked with coastal forests, which turn into dune forests and straight onto the beach. So green mambas are a high probability to see in the town once we walk on the trails. We then move further northwards into the town of Cozy Bay, which again, like I said, is right on the border of Mozambique and South Africa. Pictured here is an iconic animal from northern KZN. This is the Eastern Gaboon adder or the Eastern Gaboon viper, depending on where in the world you are. One of the snakes with the largest fangs throughout Southern Africa. So these are really on the top list of everyone that ever visits northern KZN. Any snake enthusiast or reptile enthusiast will surely recognize the Gaboon adder, and finding these really will be the cherry on top of the trip. Not a common species to find, but there's always a possibility. And we'll just go through and look at some of the smaller animals. I am really fond of the smaller, lesser known species, especially when you go on tours. Everyone knows the green mambas, the black mambas, much like your big five when it comes to mammals. But I really like to show and share my interests in the smaller, lesser known species. On the top left, we have the giant legless skink, completely harmless lizard species, which is again often confused with snakes. We probably have the grumpiest genus of frogs in all of the world. I'll put my head up and I'll say they definitely are. This is the breviceps, also known as the rain frogs. Throughout the region, we probably could encounter up to 4 different species of rain frogs. The beautiful eastern tiger snake with its orange and black markings all the way through the body, often found in and around the lodges as they hunt for geckos and lizards that sleep in the rafters. We have the painted reed frog, another beautiful species, really common all throughout the region, and highly likely we will encounter several hundred of them. They are very common. And just a closer look at the sustainable fishing methods in the Cozy Bay estuary, where the locals obviously set these traps up. And obviously, with the small gaps between the wood, small fish are able to exit, while the larger fish are then harvested for the local community. And it is just a really ancient method of fishing, and it is really nice to see the tradition carrying on. So next we head to Nkumbi Lodge, and there are several slides here because we'll be based here for 3 days, where we then explore 2 really beautiful game reserves that are just within a stone's throw of the lodge. And here we've got a little rock monitor, which is actually photographed at Nkumbi Lodge, where we'll be stationed for 3 days. And the reptile diversity in and around the lodge is fantastic. So night walks are really, really good. Even just on downtime during the day, a beautiful place to explore and find reptiles and amphibians. As you can see here, we've got an Eastern Natal green snake feeding on a velvet gecko, and that was photographed at the lodge right in front of someone's room as they were exiting. So it's a incredible place to see reptiles and amphibians literally on your front doorstep. And the puff adder, another common species across the region. On our nocturnal drives, we are quite likely to see these snakes, as they are quite abundant throughout the region, particularly after it's rained. Another really cute frog species on the bottom here, we have the mottled shovel-nosed frog, also called the mottled pig-nosed frog, and you can see why. And another common species of cobra is the forest cobra, which is found all throughout the Nkumbi Lodge. They can often be seen shooting across the path as you are sort of walking through. And again, these snakes are very fast and agile, and they just want to get away from people as quickly as possible. So there are lots of venomous snakes around. Most of them just want to escape and have nothing to do with you. So if you're fortunate, you'll see them zipping across the path up the nearest tree, chasing after a bird or the abundant red tree squirrels. Nkumbi Lodge is actually named after the red duiker, which you can see on the bottom right here. It's a very small species of antelope, and in the early mornings and late afternoons, coming in and out of the lodge, you often see them quietly shooting through the undergrowth. Also, very photogenic animals. So, if you've had a full day of reptiles and amphibians, getting a good dose of the small mammals is quite a nice break. Just to carry on, again, being based in Nkumbi, and you can see on the top right here, there's a really interesting observation of a eastern forest cobra feeding on a wood hoopoo, which was taken at the lodge. So the reptile and bird diversity is incredible, as well as the mammals. We have a male nyala in the front in center here, and below that we've got the rather cute greater bush baby, as we call them locally. And throughout the lodge, you can often hear them bouncing from tree to tree, or every now and again they'll visit your room, and you'll see them on the balustrades and the balconies, and they usually appreciate a quick photograph, and they're not too shy. We've got a beautiful southern triagama on your top left. Again, really common species to encounter throughout the region, and the males show these brilliant blues and emeralds and oranges and yellows. And also, just again, to connect with our birds, if we have sort of people that are interested in the general diversity, the crested guinea fowl is quite a special find in the area, and really restricted to the sand forest where Nkumbi is based. Sand forest is one of the smallest remaining vegetation types in northern Zululand. A lot of the area is being transformed into farming, or it's thick, dense coastal forest. the sand forest really hosts a plethora of life. So crested guinea fowl, again, always a nice sight. They generally move around in small groups. Okay, just to continue again on Nkumbi as we sort of wind down, like I said previously, I'm really interested in the small unknown reptile species. So I always do go out of my way to find things like the low-felt dwarf burrowing skink on your top left here. Again, it may look superficially just like a snake, but you can see it's got really small real limbs with that electric blue tail. Um, we've got the boomslang, which is a very iconic species throughout Africa. And this is a male in the front center here. Boom, obviously the Afrikaans word for tree. Slung is the Afrikaans word for snake. So together that's boomslang. People often think it's boom schlang, but there's no SH in it. It's just boomslang. And as well as the plethora of reptile species, at Nkumbi, we can also see the giraffe, which is not an uncommon species to see just outside of the sand forest, as well as the white rhino, which we'll see in the Shihlui-Ampolozi Game Reserve. There are no dangerous megafauna at Nkumbi Lodge. There are leopards, which you can occasionally see at night, but those don't pose any risk. So you're completely safe to walk around the lodge, and we will do several guided walks in the morning as well as the evening. So our chances to see some nocturnal animals like leopards. We can even set up a few of our camera traps, and we can see which animals come and visit you outside of your accommodation. We also have the Southern African python on your left here. Another beautiful thing about the region is in KwaZulu-Natal, we have the largest venomous snake, that being the black mamba. We have the largest non-venomous snake, being the Southern African python. And KwaZulu-Natal is also home to the smallest species of snake in South Africa, which is the thread snake, a snake that measures only about 15 to 18 centimeters in length. And of course, we have been neglecting the tortoises. We have a leopard tortoise on the bottom right, which, again, after the rains, these animals can be quite common, and they just make beautiful photographic subjects. So that is our KwaZulu-Natal in a nutshell. Sorry for racing through that a little bit. I'm just conscious of time. But that is KwaZulu-Natal. I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys would like to put in the chat, or if we have a Q&A afterwards. And if you guys have any other questions, I'm sure Dan will be more than willing to answer them, as we have recently just come back from a trip to northern KwaZulu-Natal. So both Dan and I will be able to answer any questions that you may have.